What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. Today we're taking it to an Arc Warlock build that I'm sure you've seen a couple variations of around since this thing got a gnarly buff this season. The Vesper of Radius exotic chest piece, which gives that nice explosion of blinding arc energy when we throw down our rifts. So this build is going to be all about throwing down rifts as much as possible, blinding every enemy we can while using some very fun weapons that I'm sure haven't been pulled out of the vault in a second. Right here for our abilities, aspects, and fragments, got our chaos reach for that jolt, and definitely the best of the two supers for the PvE realm. We're going to be using our healing rift for that endgame content. This thing does slap GMs, raids, grandmasters, everything in that realm, dungeons, because of the blinding, and we're just wiping enemies off the map. Now we're going to be using strafe. You can use balance or burst, totally up to you. Ball of lightning, definitely like this, got a buff this season as well. Feels a little bit better than the chain lightning melee, and the range on this thing is actually nasty when we're amplified. Pulse grenade, for sure the best in the PvE realm for our arc grenades, and this will help to create ionic traces for us and shock jolt some enemies, as you will see from our aspects and fragments. Number one is Arc Soul for our aspects. When we cast that rift, we're also going to create Arc Souls that fire at the targets while we are in the amplified state. Our Arc Souls are supercharged and gain an additional fire rate. These will track to those enemies, so this is super nice since we're casting our rift super consistently for that blinding and the Vesper. Plus this helps with healing, and it gives our allies those Arc Souls, so even more of that arc ability defeats going around. Second on the list is Electrostatic Mine, so defeating targets with arc abilities or defeating jolted or blinding targets creates ionic traces. So when we throw down our rift, we are getting not just Arc Souls, but we are blinding targets, which will help create those ionic traces. Ionic traces make us amplified, which gives us those supercharged Arc Souls, and the Arc Souls count as arc abilities, so we're getting even more ionic traces and the jolt of targets we're going to have because of our grenade. So you can see why we're getting our abilities back almost instantly, because of all the ionic traces, and we're just going to be able to throw down that rift so much, as you can see. Now, for our 4 fragments, we're going to use Spark of Shock, like I said, so our grenade is going to be able to jolt targets, which will help us proc that Electrostatic Mine and create even more ionic traces. Spark of Resistance, while surrounded, you take less damage, so this is nice for that endgame activity, getting up close and personal with Vesper, so we're using that to blind enemies when we throw down our rift, and you do have to be decently close. That AoE explosion of the rift really isn't that large, but you can stun, if you will, or blind everything in your path, so it is super nice to have this on. I am also using Spark of Amplitude, so when we are amplified, it helps us to create orbs of power, so those are going to be flowing for us as well as our allies, giving us the ability for chaos reach as well as armor charge very easily. And last but not least, Spark of Magnitude, so that pulse grenade is going to have an extended duration, allowing us to jolt more targets, defeat more targets with arc abilities, so even more ionic traces to be spread because of our ability spam on this build as well, and those jolted targets. Moving on to the weapons for this build, I am going to be using Aegir Scepter, Brigand's Law, and the 7th Seraph Saw. Now this I'm sure hasn't been pulled out for a lot of people in a minute, but Clown Cartridge Vorpal feels very nice and pairs well with our Arc subclass. Brigand's Law with Feeding Frenzy Volt Shot. This thing is absolutely nasty for ad clear in any type of content you can go into, and with that Volt Shot we can use it to jolt targets, which is going to create even more ionic traces for us. So this thing absolutely slaps, and Sidearms got a buff this season with Adderceptor as well, so we can use this to freeze targets. We can use it when we have that full super, convert to the alternate form, and use it to stun overloads as well as unstoppables. So it just seemed like the right thing to pair. You could throw on Wither Horde, anything like that. Izanagi's Burden as well. So there's a couple options, but I liked Adderceptor personally for the way that I was playing with this build. So for our artifact right here, we're going to be using that Overload Trace for our Adderceptor, but obviously the slow works as well, so you don't necessarily need this. Now we're going to be using authorized melee, strand, and arc mods for this, just in case. You can switch on to something for your strand depending on what you're going into, heavy, something like that. And then obviously we have our trusty Dusty 5 that we use on all of our arc builds with Amped Up, Thunderous Retort, Electric Armor, Lightning Strikes Twice, and Shock and Awe. So we're getting all of those amplified summons the bursts because of the amplification and the jolting of targets, so even more ionic traces. Lightning Strikes Twice, when we throw that grenade, we're going to get a nice bit of recharge for it, allowing us to shock even more targets with that jolt and create ionic traces. Gain damage resistance while amplified, so we're getting this very easily with this build. And for that end game content, Amped Up, we stay amplified longer, and Thunderous Retort, our super is going to do more damage when we are wounded in the critical, so our little bar is red, or well, we're amplified. And like I said, that is so easy to get with this build. The stats you kind of want to max out for this is resistance, recovery, so we can throw down our rift, and then discipline, so we can get that grenade back even faster, allowing us to jolt more targets. Obviously the rift, like I said, and then endgame, you want that 100 resilience to stay alive. Moving on to our armor mods, again in this arm slot, we're going to have two that help us get back our class ability a little bit faster with doing damage with grenades. I will show you though, but Bungie has them disabled at this moment. But first we're going to use Harmonic Siphon, Heavy Ammo Finder, and Heavy Ammo Scout. Just a little bit more of a support build for that end game activity, given heavy for you as well as your allies, and then that Harmonic Siphon, so our arc weapons, when we get those multiple defeats, will create even more orbs of power for us, so that Brigand's Law is flowing with this, creating orbs of power everywhere. On our arms, like I said, we got two missing mod slots, and I will be using Bolstering Detonation on one, so causing damage with a grenade gives us our class ability back, and then also causing damage with our melee gives our class ability back. So both of these will be in one of these slots, obviously Bolstering in one, and then Focusing Strike in the other, so we can get our rift back even faster. And then Grenade Kickstarter to help us get our grenade back even faster. With Lightning Strikes Twice, we're going to get a chunk back, and then Grenade Kickstarter, so we have our abilities up, specifically our grenade and our rift, almost consistently with this build because of all the ionic traces and the mods that we have on. Now, the buffed Vesper of Radius right here, we're going to be using Harmonic Resistance, Arc Resistance, as well as that melee damage resistance. You can change melee out for Concussive or Sniper, Arc right here for any of our other burns, and then we're going to keep Harmonic on, so we're going to have that additional arc resistance because of this build. Now, Planetary Torrent. Rifts periodically release arc shockwaves. Final blows with these shockwaves create an arc explosion. Well, we have that arc subclass equipped. These shockwaves and subsequent explosions blind nearby targets. That is what makes this build so good, is specifically the shockwaves creating those blinding explosions. Rift energy recharges faster when we are surrounded by targets, so another way to just get this up consistently and create that blinding effect for everything, creating orbs of power for us and creating all of those ionic traces via jolting, blinding. So it is absolutely insane. You get up close and personal, freeze a couple targets, run up to them, throw down your rift, and then it is game over. You can clear basically anything just from that. Now, when we move on to our boots, we're going to be using elemental charge. So collecting those ionic traces has a chance of giving us an armor charge, and those orbs of power as well will be giving it. So like I said, we're going to have that armor charge up consistently for this grenade Kickstarter with recuperation and insulation. So when we pick up all those orbs of power that we're creating via our arc abilities as well as our arc weapons, we're going to get back our rift even faster. So you can see that feedback loop of the exotic chest piece, insulation, as well as it'll be bolstering detonation on this as well. So we're going to have the two mods that create rift power as well as insulation, and then recuperation to give us some health back in that end game activity, and then double bomber on our class item with Reaper so we can get even more orbs of power, get back our grenade even faster. I chose double bomber instead of using distribution right here, just because we already have those other three mods in the double arm mods as well as our boots to get our class ability back, with the exotic giving it back as well. So I threw down double bomber so we can jolt even more targets, throw that even faster, pairs with grenade Kickstarter, even more ionic traces. So we're gonna just absolutely melt everything with arc explosions and jolting with this build. Grenade gets the jolt, our weapon in Brigand's Law gets the jolt, as well as our super. And with those pulses that we're going to get, we're going to blind enemies. We can freeze enemies with our Adger Scepter. So it is kind of crazy how easy this build can be run in any type of content, all the way from just normal strikes up to Grandmasters. You can just blow through that content with ease. So definitely give this build a try out. I'm sure you've probably seen a couple different variations of this, and they are all very, very good. But you do have to get up close and personal, so that is why I chose the Adger Scepter, so you can freeze enemies, get up close, throw down your rift, continue with that damage of the heavy with your abilities, with your Brigand's Law, and just jolt everything in your path, absolutely wiping out enemy after enemy after enemy. So 100% hope you like this build. Definitely a fun one of the best buffs that we got this season for an exotic. So break this bad boy out of your vault. I know it's been collecting dust in there, and give this build a try. So thank you guys again for that support. Truly appreciate it. I will catch y'all in the next one. Peace.